Hey everyone, this is Fabriello and welcome back. It's been a while, but I'm very excited for this video. This is something that I've always wanted to do, basically since I started this channel, because as you can see from the title of this, I finally decided to bring this entire collection together and talk about it from my point of view and why this series is so important to me. I don't know why I'm dragging on this because as I said, you saw the title, you know what I'm talking about. The Breath of Fire series. This has been a long time coming because, as I mentioned quite often um, throughout my different videos, Breath of Fire it's my favorite RPG series of all time. It always will be. Nothing will change that. And it's not only nostalgia. I mean, there is a good nostalgia part in this, but the impact, the overall impact of this series is just too much for me to ignore it. And no matter what I do, no matter what games I play, I never experience anything like this. And that's what counts to me with gaming, the overall experience. And with Breath of Fire, since I started these games, a long time ago now. I think it was either 1998 or even more plausibly it was 1999, if I remember correctly. Um, it's because it's something that changed me deeply as a gamer. Because while it's not the first JRPG series that I ever experienced, it's the one that not only solidified my love for JRPGs, but brought it to the next and next level. Basically, I am the JRPG fan and player that I am today because of the Breath of Fire series. As I experienced other games before, primarily some Final Fantasies and Phantasy Star and something like that, but those games, even Final Fantasy VI, even though I loved it, it didn't have the long-term impact that Breath of Fire 6, the Breath of Fire, not Breath of Fire 6, that Breath of Fire had. Certainly not Breath of Fire 6. Fuck that game, as we'll talk later. But because, as I say, I experienced Final Fantasy VI on the PlayStation 1, blew me away completely. But then I was disappointed by Final Fantasy VII. That game to me was a considerable step down, and Final Fantasy VIII didn't exactly blew me away again. I mean, it was a bit better than 7, but I'll say this is not as good as 6. Then we had 9, but this was later on the PlayStation 1, and that was okay. I was like, okay, Final Fantasy is going to the right direction. But in the meanwhile, I played two phenomenal Breath of Fire games that to me are just as good as 6, and for certain very personal elements, one of those I like it more than Final Fantasy 6. Criminally, I know. But what I'm going to do in this video, after this brief introduction, I'm going to talk, as I said, about my experience with the Breath of Fire series, how I started it, how I kept playing it, and how I've made it basically my lifelong objective as a gamer to collect everything there is to collect about Breath of Fire. Obviously, without going too much into crazy stuff, but the problem is that, as we will talk later, this series has never been very nurtured by its creators, which is a damn tragedy. But I'm doing what I can in terms of I'm double dipping on the games I've bought like at least all the games. I have two versions of all five of them, and going forward into the future, I'm planning to buy more versions of certain games, and we will talk about it. I have some cool collectible items, but I say not much because I say it's not been nurtured by Capcom. Um, just a brief intro, okay? Breath of Fire, as you probably know, started on the Super Nintendo a long time ago, 1993, when Capcom, seeing that RPGs were becoming more and more popular and profitable games in Japan, and like you say, as a sort of reflection, but not as much, like the JRPGs were started to catch the attention of a certain Western audience, they decided, fuck it, we're going to do that as well. We'll do a JRPG, we'll do a role-playing game as well. And they created Breath of Fire, Ryu no Senshi, pardon my pronunciation, Breath of Fire 1, The Dragon Warrior. Though it's not the game I play, because obviously this wasn't released in Europe. The first, however, this is just how it started. Never heard of Breath of Fire 1 and 2 when I was a kid. Because again, like Breath of Fire 2 again was released much later. I think I didn't even know up until recently that the Super Nintendo game was released in Europe, actually. I was like, what? Really? I don't believe you. But actually was like 1996, like super late in the Super Nintendo lifespan. By that time, I think I already owned a PS1, or maybe I was in the process of getting one. So no wonder I didn't hear about it. But as I say, we have to move forward. So 6 years after this, this announcement that to me was completely unheard. I was in a game store in my city, walking around looking for games, and back then I wasn't the same gamer as I will become and as I am now. Like JRPGs weren't my priority as they are now. As I said in another video, like if someone back then would ask me, what is your favorite game of all time, to 13-year-old me, I would probably say either Super Castlevania 4 or Mega Man X. Both of them are fantastic games. Super Castlevania 4 is still one of my favorite games of all time. It's probably my favorite non-RPG game. But as I say, RPGs were not exactly a priority. Like, they started to really scratch the itch thanks to Final Fantasy VI. I was like, wow, I wouldn't mind playing more games like that. And all of a sudden, I stumbled completely randomly upon this game. Like, I never heard of it. I didn't know what this series was. Even though I was starting to read magazines, I didn't know about it. It's like, Breath of Fire 3? What is this? And I don't have my PlayStation or my original PS1 version. That's in Italy together with my PS1. However, I have the substitute here. I got the PSP version of Breath of Fire 3. This is the game that started it all. I stumbled upon it. The cover art of the PlayStation 1 European, it's not as cool as this, but because I always love this drawing of Ryu and Nina. And you can also see other characters. There's Momo, Tipu, Ray. So cool. And the dragon in the background. If I saw something, if I would have seen something like this as a kid back then, I was like, whoa, what is that? If I remember correctly, the European version has like a ugly drawing of Nina, if that's the version. And the North American, I think, is the one with the flaming sword, which is kind of cool, but kind of generic. And again, like the European version, it's not that good. It's, like I said, like there's an ugly polygon version of Nina. But still, it caught my attention. I said, oh, what is this? I never heard of this game. So I started reading the back. I was like, this looks interesting. You know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to play this game. So I brought it home, and nothing was the same ever again, because I was transported into a world that I couldn't imagine. It's like a weird, colorful world populated by weird anthropomorphic animals for the most part. And I will never forget the first part of the game. When you start, you see the two miners going around and doing their business, and all of a sudden they saw the crystal with inside a small dragon, and all of a sudden transform into a child. I was like, oh, what is this? And of course, back then, I was blown away by the graphics. That's Breath of Fire 3. It's still one of the most gorgeous games I ever saw in my life. It was back then, I never saw anything like that. I mean, Super Nintendo games are still and were gorgeous. As I said, Mega Man X, Super Metroid, Castlevania 4, gorgeous games. But Breath of Fire 3 it was really on the next level of, like, especially like artistically, because at the same time I was really getting into anime, and this had a very strong anime artistic direction. So it's like, whoa, this is incredible. Like the animation, not only just the graphics, but as I said, like the animation as well, or like story-wise and in combat. As I said, like in first impact, seeing something like that, I would completely, like, my jaw hit the floor basically. I was like, whoa, this is a video game. It's like playing a really good looking anime. And as I said, that was just the first minutes of me playing the game. I was already blown away. And then, of course, it took me months to beat it, but I finished the game eventually. And I couldn't believe what I played. I never experienced anything like Breath of Fire 3. The only game that kind of shocked me, for a reason that I will not tell, of course, but primarily for story reason, was Final Fantasy VI. Because, again, I never experienced anything like the big twist with the game. I was like, whoa. And it's still something that few games, of no games, have done. And also, like, Breath of Fire 3 did something that I was not exposed to, and very few games have done since then. And it's, you start with your character as a child, but then you experience most of its life, let's say like this, even though it's not as it's a bit subtler in Breath of Fire 3 in a way. Like, you start with Ryu as a kid, and then he grows up probably to a young adult, and it's not that he's growing up again, but other than Breath of Fire 3 and 4 and Dragon Quest 5, that's a very rare thing in games, I think. If you know more, let me know, of course, because I like that mechanics. It's a way to get more attached to the main character, I think, because you follow it throughout its life. But again, never experienced anything like that. Breath of Fire 3 has an amazing story and unforgettable characters, and both of these make me think about things that I never even considered when I was playing a video game. I still remember some of the most interesting parts to me concern like Gar and Tipu, these kind of characters, or also other moments throughout the games when you're actually questioning your actions and you're thinking, like, is this the right thing to do? And what are my actions rightful? Am I doing the right thing? How far am I willing to go just to follow my beliefs? How far I'm willing to go for revenge? All these things that I never experienced before, and I will never experience again because of this game. And again, it's something that you don't see that often. I mean, a bit more, and probably, I don't want to say, like, it's perhaps lately I haven't experienced anything like that, if I had to be honest. But it depends on the game. Like, the last game that really made me think a lot was Nier, for example. But Breath of Fire did it first, of course. And again, with that graphics, with those characters, with that story, the combat system is kind of simple. It's just turn-based. But again, combined with the fact that it looks so gorgeous, and I like the music very much. Maybe it was not as good as Final Fantasy VI, but it was still a very solid soundtrack. And as I say, plenty of unforgettable moments. There is a reason why, in my mind, this is the most important game I ever played. Sure, gaming technology has evolved since 1998 and 1999. But the overall impact, the overall experience that I had while playing this game, it's something that cannot be replicated. And it's something I will never forget. I will never forget this game. I will never forget these characters. And I was completely mesmerized by this. And as I said, I never looked back. Already at the time, I would say, if someone would ask me, say, Breath of Fire 3 is my favorite game of all time, most of my friends say, Breath of what? Because, again, it was not that well commercialized. It was not very well known. Because, again, you have to think that those were very different times. I didn't have the internet. Magazines were our internet, and still, maybe I completely skipped it because I didn't buy them every month religiously as I did later with the PS1 and onwards. But monumental game, as I said. If I have to say the most important game I've played in my life, Breath of Fire 3. Say I played better games, but the impact this had on me was, I mean, in a way, well, let's be very dramatic here. I mean, this game changed my life as a gamer. Without Breath of Fire 3, I would probably be a very different gamer. Maybe I would have still got into JRPGs from a different angle, but I still think that it's because of these games and others, like its sequel, Legend of Dragoon, that made me experience stories that I would have never experienced with other games, that made me as fanatical as I was, and still am, with JRPGs. So, Breath of Fire 3, I mean, as I said, monumental game. Then, I played this game, as I say, like the internet was in its infancies at the time, but it was starting to spread. But still, at the time, late 90s, early 2000s, word of mouth and magazines were how I learned about game. So, a few years passed. I play other games, and I remember reading articles about Capcom developing a sequel to Breath of Fire 3, and I was like, oh my god, I need that game right now. I cannot wait. But somehow, interesting enough, I don't remember why I didn't buy it day one, because again, one thing you have to remember, back then games weren't as available to me as they are now. It was harder for me to get games because I depended on my parents, and games were not as available as they are today. Very different times, which in a weird way, to me made games even more special than they are today. The magic is kind of gone to me about that, but that's a totally different story. But I remember that one day I wasn't planning of buying games. I wasn't into a game store. I was just going around doing some errands with probably my parents, I would say. I'm pretty sure, actually. And it was 2003, and I found this even better, I think. It was a very small newspaper store. Just plenty of newspapers, magazines, everything. I wanted to buy a PlayStation magazine or something like that when I saw this. And when I saw this, I needed a fresh pair of pants, basically, because I was like, I couldn't believe it. I like at the time I didn't even know this game was out. Probably I missed it again. Maybe I saw it. I asked my parents to say no, so I have to wait a couple of years. But then, of course, I begged my parents. I was just like, please, 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 I need this game. It's the reason for my life, or some nonsense like that. My mom probably said, yeah, whatever, you can have it. It's like, yes, yes, yes. So yes, the first time I played Breath of Fire 4, it was on a PC. I never had a dedicated gaming PC, but luckily it ran this like a champ. I played it and beat it on PC for the first time, and wow, 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 wow! This is my favorite game of all time. Even like it's an individual game. It took basically everything that 3 did and did it better. It's at the time, but even it's the crazy thing, it's even now, but at the time this was the most beautiful game I ever saw. And the crazy thing is I replayed it recently on the PS2 because of something I will show you in a second, but replayed it recently like a month ago, and I was thinking like it's incredible. This game still holds up. It still looks gorgeous. So this was like no wonder this was Capcom at the peak of their game, basically. But this is an incredible game. This is an incredible JRPG. It has a wonderful story. It has one of my favorite combat systems of all time. It has one of the most unforgettable cast of characters. It's one of the best looking games I ever experienced. The music, it's gorgeous. The lore of this game, it always, I still think about this when I think about like the Endless and all of that. It has one of the greatest antagonists of all time with the character of Fo Lu. I was so engrossed with this story, especially I love Ryu's story and his travels with Nina to find her sister and what happened there. That was an amazing story already. It was a great story of war and peace and all of that. But then you have Fo Lu. You started the game as Ryu, and then you decide, who is this guy? You start to learn more about him, the god Emperor Fo Lu. And then you experience his side of the story and his progressive as he progressively lost faith in humanity and decided, you know what, I'm gonna kill them all. It's done, you can say like a heel turn done to perfection with Fo Lu. Easily the best antagonist and then villain, because it's not just a villain, especially at the beginning. I mean, his return was prophesied and all of that, but the Empire, for some reason, wanted to stop him because of who he is. And all that's so great. Unforgettable stuff. Love this. As I said, like the combat system, it's perfection to me. Basically, Breath of Fire 3, it's a simple turn-based. It has a simple turn-based battle system, which is great. I love it. Always love my turn-based systems. This peppered it up by offering you the possibility of changing your party members in battle, something that few RPGs did and still few are still doing. Final Fantasy X is famous for doing that. This came first, and in my opinion, it did it even better than Final Fantasy X. And Final Fantasy X, I think, is the best battle system of the entire series. So, this did it first and did it better. The characters, I mean, I will never forget this cast of characters. Some of the most likable cast of characters. I wanted this game to be like 100 years old. 100 years, yeah, that's a bit excessive. 100 hours long, because I wanted to stay with this character as long as possible, with Ryu and Nina, of course, with Ursula, with Ershin, Shias, all of them. They're so Cray, of course, Cry, call him whatever you like. Such a likable bunch of characters. As I said, there's a reason why this is and always will be my favorite game of all time. I mean, always is a big word, but as I said, Breath of Fire 3 was monumental, and already back then, and even more now, I think this took everything that 3 did and made it better. This, as I said, this is Breath of Fire at its zenith, at the peak of its popularity and relevance. Perfection. This is RPG perfection. If you never experienced this game, I mean, I don't know what to say. It's pathetic, because it's one of the greatest RPGs ever made. And of course, I mean, I played this for the first time on PC, but then obviously I got wise, and whenever I could, I bought this PS1 version, which is still my original. You can see there is like a small crack in here. I lost the manuals, the instruction manuals, damn it. But I replayed it, refinished it. I want to replay it. That's why I started this on the PS2 like a month ago. But I realized, oh shit, I don't have my PS1 memory card. I cannot save. But yeah, my favorite game of all time, Breath of Fire 4. RPG perfection. There's no other way. This is more than a 10 out of 10 to me, because it took everything that 3 did and to me was already perfection and made it better. This is an 11 out of 10 to me. It just completely shocked me. I say Breath of Fire to me is the top of the RPG genre. There's no story there. So yeah, unbelievable game. Then something happened. Indeed, it happened. In 2003, I reading magazines and all of that, but there's also the internet by this point. I learned that Capcom was making a sequel on the PS2, so I was even more than excited. I was like, oh yes, let's see what they're gonna do on this monster console. Even though I went Xbox, for a brief while I owned a PS2 with a couple of games, including the following that I bought day one, of course. Breath of Fire 5 Dragon Quarter. Oh boy, this really much divided the fan base. Let's go with some order. I didn't keep my PS2 for long because again, I couldn't really afford to buy games, so I was really engrossed with the Xbox at that point. So I sold my PS2 to a friend of my best friend, basically. But he didn't want my games because I only had RPGs. I had Final Fantasy X and X-2, Breath of Fire 5, and a couple of others which he actually bought, which were no, just one more. It was called like CY Girls, which was like a sort of action stealth game that I bought for next to nothing. So basically, my best friend said, well, you know, my friend is not interested at all in RPGs. I said, well, I kept them. So I kept my Final Fantasies. And of course, I would never sell this. I said, this is not for sale. It's like, what the hell is that? Never mind, it's just the greatest series of all time. And by the way, I love the European cover of this. I saw like the North American one is very generic, like with the 3 characters on the front. But when I saw this, like, this is mine. And this is a very interesting one. As I said, this splitted the fan base, even though it seems to suggest like a 50-50. I would say more of a 25-75, meaning that the majority of people think this is a terrible, terrible game. This is garbage. It's not worth existing. I'm on the other side on this. I always really liked Dragon Quarter. A lot of you Breath of Fire purists might think that I'm crazy, but yeah, it's a different game. I accepted its differences and played it and very much enjoyed it. In fact, this year I absolutely want to replay this because there is a good game here. There is a good game. It's just different. That's all the controversy with this game because, oh my god, it's an action RPG. It's not turn-based anymore. What's going on here? Oh, the humanity. Think of the children. That's it. Also, there is another reason why this game is not very well liked. This game is tough as balls. This is a very difficult RPG. Easily one of the hardest I ever played. And I cannot wait to replay it. But it's very curious, speaking of Dragon Quarter, the fact that I read an article recently that very appropriately it's titled like Breath of Fire should come back, and I couldn't agree more, as we will talk later. And it makes a comparison, say that Dragon Quarter, you can almost call it a proto-Souls game. I was like, that's interesting. The thing is, I never played Dark Souls as a series. I never had the chance. I own Dark Souls on PS3, but I never touched it. And now I'm getting very interested and curious about trying Dark Souls on the Switch. So we'll see. And I was thinking that would be perfect for Capcom to rebrand this game as a Souls game. People would go nuts for it because it's the cool game to like, of course. But I love this, actually. That's the thing. I really liked it, even though it's very different. And I think that's also a big mistake that Capcom made on their behalf. They pushed this, in a way, rightly so, but they pushed this. This is Breath of Fire 5. But if you notice, I think this is very correct. It doesn't have the number 5. They should have just titled it Breath of Fire Dragon Quarter and push this as a sort of parallel series. They say like, this is not technically number 5. We're experimenting with our series because we love it so much. We want to do something different with it. But Breath of Fire 5 will come. It's more like 4. Don't worry about it. But let us create something different. I would go nuts for something like that. I would appreciate it even more, actually. But of course they didn't. And this didn't do very well, unfortunately. And it's, as I said, it's very divisive among the fans. But I really like it. I think it's a very, very interesting game. I love how claustrophobic it is. I like its story. I like its combat system. It's really hard. I love the villain, like Bosch. It's a really piece of shit. And but I love the mood of it. I love everything about this. I love the music, by the way. I think 4 is really good though. But the music in this is excellent. And I also love the fact that for once Ryu is not a silent protagonist, but Nina is for story reasons. But and that's also one thing that I really love about Breath of Fire is the fact that you always had the two protagonists, Ryu and Nina, being always there. For some reason, it worked to me. I don't know if other series could do this. Why not? It's an interesting concept, but only Breath of Fire did it, and every game in the series has different incarnations of Ryu and Nina. I find it brilliant as an idea, and I always love this version of Ryu. But you also have Lyn, who is a badass. I always love it. I really always defend Dragon Quarter, because mainly the people I think didn't like it because it's really hard, because 4 it's phenomenal, but it's on the easy side if I have to be honest, but I still love it. This is really tough, and it's an action RPG, so it's different. So worst game ever made. And I remember people commenting on this, even though it's clear that I never played it. It's like, oh yeah, I heard it's bad, I never play it. But what you know, maybe you'll like it, give it a chance. But cannot wait to replay this as soon as possible this year. And yeah, I will always defend Dragon Quarter. Very interesting addition to the Breath of Fire series. And then we started with the Tale of Woe and Sorrow, because Dragon Quarter was released in 2003. And basically, for 10 years, Capcom didn't release anything it didn't do anything with the series. They didn't release anything new. However, luckily enough, like much later, while I was waiting for a game to come out, it was like, what happened to Breath of Fire? Why can't we have Breath of Fire 6? Why can't we have Dragon Quarter 2? I learned, incredible, that the first 2 games has been released years ago on the Game Boy Advance. So, of course, I got both Breath of Fire 1 and Breath of Fire 2 on the Game Boy Advance, the GBA. Played them back to back, love them. Let's start with the first one, Breath of Fire. Let me, if I can open this. There you go. I don't have the boxes because it was stupidly expensive, so the card is enough for me. Also because I have options. But Breath of Fire 1. This is where it all started. So as I said, 1993, Ryu no Senshi. You can tell that it's the first game in the series, and I'm not saying that as a negative, but it's just facts. This game, it's rough. It's rough around the edges, but there is a good game in here. Capcom just crafted this, and it was sort of a... I was thinking about another metaphor, but rough around the edges is perfect because there are plenty of good moments in here. There are some very emotional moments because Breath of Fire, it's filled with dark and depressing moments throughout the series. And you got some, at least 2 big ones here. I already mentioned in another video, but I loved it. And I would like to replay it eventually, but I know it's kind of like, it's tough to go back to this because this is old school RPG. But really enjoy my time. I can appreciate being the progenitor of the series, which introduced some of the most important elements, such as like Ryu, Nina, the dragoon, yeah, the dragon transformations, and and it started the original story, because then later I discovered that the first 3 games are connected because of the main villain, the goddess Tyr, which, by the way, the first time I saw Tyr in Breath of Fire 3, the final battle, again, I was like pooping my pants because I never saw anything like that, except maybe Kefka or some of the weird bosses in Final Fantasy VI. But when I saw that with that graphics especially, those graphics were insane, so that it's sort of angel with this whole monster attached to it. I was like, whoa, man. And then, immediately afterwards, I played Breath of Fire 2, also known in Japan as Breath of Fire 2 Shimei no Ko, the Fated Child. Also, technically, I think it's the Destined Child, but it reminds me like the band. So I always call it the Fated Child, which sounds better, I think. But basically, they took Breath of Fire 1 and basically they polished it into a diamond. because this is a fantastic 6-bit RPG. Absolutely brilliant. And for what I understand, beside like fan translations and all of that, whatever, this is the definitive way of playing the game. Because for what I understand, on the Super Nintendo, there are like serious difficulty spikes. Well, I didn't encounter here, so I don't know if it's the same. But I had such a good time. I was like, this game is fantastic. This is brilliant. I love the story. It's so dark, such a dark story. I love the cult of Saint Eve. It's the beginning with that music, with the Destiny Child again, like the fated child. When you see like the opening cutscene with the big eye, like praise to God, pray me, give me your strength. I was like, what the fuck is that? And then you discover what Saint Eve is. And especially one thing that I love that unfortunately they didn't explore enough. I mean, for a 16-bit RPG, it's already good, but they could have done better. I think it's the relation between Ryu and Baruberi, the second most important villain in the game. Because I think that's brilliant. Again, they should have done it a bit more. For example, having Ryu been tormented in his dreams and something like that. Because especially like you started the game with Ryu as a kid, again, something that will carry on in 3. And you're having fun with your friends and all of that, and all of a sudden you go into a cave. So yeah, don't be a pussy. Let's explore the cave, Ryu. They see something moving, and all of a sudden these two kids are confronted by this gigantic demon monster. It was so cool when you see like little Ryu with a stick basically fighting this gigantic demon. I was like, oh my god, this is brilliant. And then you encounter Baruberi at the end, and you have this sort of like epic confrontation kind of moment when Baruberi says like, I've been tormenting you since childhood, I am your nemesis. And I was like, this is brilliant. If only they would explore this a bit better, but still I'm very happy. And that battle was really, really tough. And I admitted I wasn't able to do it with Ryu on its own. I had to use my entire party. Baruberi is tough, but great story. Always loved the rivalry between the two. But again, like great story. It has my favorite incarnation of Nina with this like amazing black wings, which once you start to understand what those wings mean, what the impact they had on not only on Nina herself but on her family, the sacrifice that will happen with her sister. I mean, it's such a good story, such a good story. And like the final battle against Death Heaven, and I managed to get the best ending in the game and all that. I mean, it's just a 10 out of 10 16-bit RPG. My favorite together with Final Fantasy VI from that era. Even though I played it out of its time, it's still phenomenal. Phenomenal. As I said, they took a very interesting, like, let's say, a game with a lot of potential, and they polished into a diamond. So that's what Breath of Fire 2 is. And laying the foundation for the series to explode into, to me, one of the best RPG series ever made. But that's the thing. These were the only 2 games I had, and it's the tragedy of this. They still are the only Breath of Fire games ever released to the West. We never had anything from Capcom other than these 5. I mean, we're lucky enough to have them, of course, but why stop there? I mean, there was so much potential. They could have easily made a follow-up to 4. They could easily made a follow-up to 5. So the tale of woe continues later. For now, let me show you some of my collectibles here, because as I said, throughout the years, I decided I want not everything, but I want more. I want this series to be the for a while was the sole focus of my collection, in terms of like if one series that I'll try to get as much as possible. Now there's also Legend of Heroes, which is my current favorite series, but Breath of Fire has always been the special, like on top of everything. So I didn't bother spending the stupid amount of money on boxed Game Boy Advance games, because for next to nothing, I bought this gorgeous Game Boy Advance, this Japanese version of the Game Boy Advance, version edition of 1, which I absolutely love this art. Just look at Ryu, look at Nina, and all the other characters. This is fantastic. I love it. And as I said, like, I spent nothing for this, which is much better than the Western color and Game Boy box. So I'm very, very pleased with this. And yeah, so cool. I know there is a manga of, I think it's very short though, Breath of Fire is a sort of sequel to Breath of Fire 1, which I wouldn't mind buying, even though I cannot read Japanese. Because I think it was translated, but just like the first 5 chapters or something like that. Because obviously, like, who the fuck cares about Breath of Fire? And speaking of manga, there's also like a gorgeous manga version of 4, which unfortunately just retell the same story. They didn't tell anything different, but the artist did such a good job. I think it's like amazing character designs. I mean, I would definitely get those, but they're quite pricey. So, but that would be certainly an addition to my Breath of Fire collection at some point. In the meanwhile, rebought a Japanese version of Breath of Fire 1 on Game Boy Advance, and I love this so much. It's always like in the back of my videos in my room, because now, as you can see, I changed the scenery. Maybe you noticed just now, but next, of course, I wanted a Japanese version of 2, because I only have the Game Boy card. So I decided to go for this amazing Super Famicom box. It's complete with everything. I love this, such an important part of the game and the story of the fated child. Again, this was try to buy a Super Nintendo version with box of Breath of Fire 2. I think it would be at least $150, $200. I think I spent 10 with free expedition, and it's in perfect conditions. And let me just show you this. I thought there was a map. Oh no, that is Legend of Heroes 2 has a map, not this one. But of course, you got the cartridge, Super Famicom, love it. We'll never take it out of here. Keep it safe. Then you got the manual with its gorgeous arts, and I love on the back we have Chibi Nina. This is brilliant. And I love these old instruction booklets, and you can have a lot of art. That's the beauty of it. I never read the manuals because I need to know how to attack, because I wanted the art. But now, of course, you cannot have them because you have art books and all those crazy special editions with statues and everything. Like, look at this. Gorgeous art. Again, very important, pivotal moment of the game when you discover about the dragon and all of that phenomenal story of the fated. Oh, that's why there was no map. I forgot, because it's here, even though it doesn't say anything. But armies, no, they're just some Japanese words. But of course, yes, Ryu and Nina. As I said, Nina, best version of this character. The bow, cat, Stan, Rand, all the characters. I love here and there. You have some gorgeous art like this. Ryu and Bo chatting with a statue of the dragon god. Very cool. Very, very cool. This is fun. Stan is just like getting kicked by this monster. Cat is retreating, and Aspar is just like saying, "Should I do something?" Well, I think he can handle. This is also very nice. I just love this art. See, Ryu, Stan, and Rand just chilling out on the fire. Very, almost like Chrono Trigger-ish. When all of them pray, and I wonder if they pray for the Dragon God or Saint Eve. Oh, that's so cool. Special abilities. Magic, nice. Oh, there's even some monster here and there. But anyway, sorry, I got distracted by this. It's so amazing. Now let's put Nina in front. So yeah, so I got this amazing Super Famicom edition of Breath of Fire 2 for, as I said, like next to nothing. Very, very happy with this. You see, Breath of Fire 2, the fated child. I don't own Japanese versions of neither 3 and 4. because there is a specific item of Breath of Fire 3 that I want to procure, but it's very pricey. So it will happen eventually, but not anytime soon. And I want to import the PS1 version of 4 because I love the art, the cover art, which it's basically, it's kind of the same as these, the normal cover, but with a slightly better art and colors, which I love it. And I want another version of this. It would be nice if there is another edition, I don't know, a PSP or PS Vita. Yeah, right, we can dream of this, but oh, alas. But in the meanwhile, I'm also very happy with this. I procured for myself this amazing PS2 version of Dragon Quarter with, just look at the difference in art. I mean, I already said, like, this is pretty cool. It has something of fantasy-ish or whatever. Look at this. This is amazing. I don't know why I didn't use this. And let's not even compare with the bland, horrible North American one. But I couldn't resist. I have to have this. I like the game and I friggin' love the art. Still sealed and all of that, but it's not that PS2 games are that valuable. But I had, as I said, I have to have at least one Japanese version of each game. So, and Dragon Quarter is no brainer. Of course, I'm gonna buy it. And finally, the last item. So as you can see, not that much. But the final item, I did an entire video on this, so I'm not going to take too much time, but it needs to be shown because this is basically the only item for like collectors and fans that Capcom has ever released, and that is this gorgeous art book. The official complete works, and this is the paperback. Now there is a hardback in English by Udon. I don't know if I'm going to buy it, to be honest. I already have the book. It's just a different format, and this is more convenient, to be honest. And I hate hardback books. So, but if you're a Breath of Fire fan, this is absolutely mandatory because it's the only art book of the series. Oh wow! As I said, like regarding like the lore of Breath of Fire 4, when you have this amazing art and moments. Still remember like when there is the musician singing the song about the endless and you see the dragon. It's like, oh, so good. Of course, Ryu and Fo Lu, but I love the cover and the back. You got all the 5 incarnations of Ryu in the cover, and on the back all the different incarnations of Nina. Very, very cool. But yeah, basically this is the only proper support that the series has ever received. Because yeah, as I said, in Japan there are some mangas here and there, which it's kind of common for what I understand. Like even Fire Emblem, Star Ocean, the series all had some sort of manga released or expansions. But I always had the feeling, and I think it's true, that Capcom never nurtured this series. Even when it was at the peak of its popularity during the PS1 era, it was also a different time, yes, but they never really nurtured it. They never really released action figures. They never really released art book until very recently. I got this from Japan. It was a couple of years, some years ago. When was there? Is there a date? Well, 1983. It's just the first game, but. Oh well, but I'm not even sure if the English version is available in Europe yet. Maybe, maybe not. As I said, like I'm not sure if I'm gonna buy it. But again, never received action figures. Art book, just one. Look at the slew of art book they have released for Street Fighter of all series. Now I understand that's one of the big cash cows, but still, in terms of art, how can you compare Street Fighter with Breath of Fire? Street Fighter has at least 15 books for one book out of Breath of Fire or Darkstalkers, both series that artistically I would say are infinitely better than Street Fighter. For example, Breath of Fire would be amazing as a manga, as an anime, never released. I mean, I remember like that commercial in Japan for Breath of Fire 3 with that song, which there are some brief moments of a sort of Breath of Fire anime, as I said, like in terms of cinematics. You see Ryu running around with a sword and yelling, and you see Nina, it's like, oh my god, why don't we have a Breath of Fire anime? It would be so good. But as I said, like the Tales of Wolves continues because I remember reading recently. Actually, I've read that between 2008 and 2009, so we were already like 5 to 6 actually years after the release of Dragon Quarter, and we had nothing, like crickets, from Capcom regarding Breath of Fire. Because at one point, I don't remember when, like Inafune, yeah, because that's a good source. Like he said, like, the JRPG market is very competitive. We're not sure if we want to invest resources into Breath of Fire. It's like, what the hell? But basically, 2008-9, at one point, Camelot approached Capcom and they expressed interest in developing a title for the Breath of Fire series if Capcom continued to be unwilling to do so. And obviously nothing happened. But when I read this, I was like, oh my god, if only. I mean, I'm sure Camelot would have done a phenomenal work with Breath of Fire, because maybe you know them primarily for Mario Golf and Mario Tennis and all of that, which is great. But remember, Camelot are really, really good in developing RPGs. The Shining series and Shining Force trilogy in particular, Golden Sun, it's all Camelot. And especially, they're very, very good at telling a dual story kind of thing, because you see the perspective of both sides, and that would be so good for a series like Breath of Fire, which scratched that itch with Folu's story in 4. Camelot would have done an amazing, amazing job. As I said, crickets, because, I don't know, it always perplexed me and irritated me the way Capcom, I cannot say mistreated, but they did, up until recently, but they did nothing with this series. Because they were too busy just re-release or release like Street Fighter and Resident Evil games, to the point that I never really cared about Street Fighter, but Resident Evil, they kind of killed it for me. I don't care about Resident Evil as I used to. Back on the PS1, it was one of my favorite series. Now, I don't really care about it anymore because they keep releasing titles for that series. Which it sounds like a paradox, because if they kept release titles for Breath of Fire, would it have the same effect? I don't know. But to see, like, the thing that really kills me about Capcom is the fact it has one of the best, like, IP libraries in gaming. And they, for the most part, they do nothing with it. I'm still waiting not only for more Breath of Fire games, I'm still waiting for new Dino Crisis. I'm still waiting for new Darkstalkers games. I mean, and so many others, and they do nothing. I understand that from a business perspective, they have to push the popular titles, Street Fighter, Resident Evil, but give a chance to the others, because you have dedicated fan bases to all of the other titles and series. But, in 2013, I still remember, that was a year, I don't remember the exact date, but that was a year that will remain in infamy for Breath of Fire fans. Because at one point, Capcom dropped the bomb on us and say, Breath of Fire 6 is coming. And I was just mesmerized. I was like, oh my fucking god, it's happening. A new game is coming. The series is not dead. Even though, like, basically 10 years has passed, which is an eternity in gaming. But then, as I say, Breath of Fire 6, a new game, and then I start reading an article about it and news about it, and I was more and more angry. I was more and more perplexed. I was like, the more I read, the more I was thinking, what the fuck are they doing? And as I said at the beginning, fuck Breath of Fire 6. I mean, because that's, I'm sure this is what happened. Basically, as we know, I mean, what is Breath of Fire 6? Because I don't have it, of course. I will never have it, even if it would have like a physical release. I would not buy it, because basically it's the game that killed the franchise to me. It was the last nail in the coffin. Basically, they released this generic multiplayer game exclusively for phones, exclusively in Japan, I mean, and in 1.5 years, the servers were already closed because they realized it was a shitty game. So, good job. Basically, what happened to me is Capcom or like a subsidiary or just the interns were developing this very generic game for phones, and Capcom said, wait a second. If we put the Breath of Fire titles on it, maybe we'll sell better because fans are clamoring for one. It is a big title still. It still has some values. Let's do it. We're good at our jobs. Yes. Go Team Success. And as I said, like they killed the series basically. So now the future of the series, does it have a future? No, I don't think so. I would be extremely surprised if Capcom would do something with Breath of Fire, to be honest. I mean, I hope so. It's my favorite series. I mean, yay, they re-released 1 and 2 for the Switch, and so if you never played it, you have a chance to play Breath of Fire 1 and 2, especially 2, it's very good, but again, it's not for everyone. Both of them are very, very, very old school RPGs, so I don't know how well they will resonate. Excuse me. But that's about it. I don't understand why, considering that now we are actually in the golden age of reboots and remakes, why not remake Breath of Fire? It would be super easy for them to do. I would say, I've always imagined they should remake the first 4 games with the exact same engine of 4, but as much HD as you can. Perfect. It would be like the most beautiful game in the history of games. Maybe you can have additional content and all that nonsense, but just bring the game with a fresh coat of paint for a new generation to experience, because probably if you ask to a random 11, 13 years old on YouTube, they probably don't know what Breath of Fire is. Or if they know, they just, maybe I heard the name, it's an old game, it's sad, like it's, the series as a whole, it's absolute RPG treasure. It's, beside my fanboyism to it, I mean, it's objectively a phenomenal series. Really, really good. And the way it's been mistreated always really angered me, because it pains me to see how a company can ignore its own series. As I said, I can understand what they did business-wise, but still, God, what they did to Breath of Fire is unforgivable. And then they released like a shit game like 6, which kind of almost the same thing that happened in Dino Crisis. They just release a random game, slap the title, and yeah, buy it, guys. So, as I said, I don't know. I mean, I would be extremely surprised if Capcom will do anything with Breath of Fire. Unfortunately, I think I think it's dead. The massive flop of 6 made it obvious. As I said, that was to me like the last nail in the coffin. It's very sad. It's very sad that what to me is the best RPG series ever experienced died in such a miserable way. But what can we do? I mean, it's clear that probably Capcom lost interest, and I heard people saying that Dragon's Dogma can be considered in a way the spiritual successor of Breath of Fire. I don't know, to be honest. I mean, I played Dragon's Dogma. It's fun. There are dragons, yes. So it's a Capcom game with dragons. So it's Breath of Fire. It's not really. And also say, like, if Breath of Fire would be released today, it would look like Dragon's Dogma. Say, really? Because I don't know if Breath of Fire will look like a Western sort of RPG. I mean, to me, Breath of Fire has to have that anime looks with the gorgeous color plate, not be dark and depressing like Dragon's Dogma. And I'm talking about that I really like Dragon's Dogma. I mean, I really like the final part of Dragon's Dogma, but I don't buy it as the spiritual successor. Maybe people, I think I read that people involved in Breath of Fire was brought to Dragon's Dogma, which is great, but I don't know if I will go as far as saying it's the spiritual successor. But we'll see. I mean, I hope, because Capcom lately has been doing so well with its like either remakes or new games, like from Resident Evil 2, Devil May Cry, and I'll admit it, I'm quite excited for whatever reason. Well, not for whatever reason, but about the Resident Evil 3 remake. I mean, I didn't care about 2, even though I loved Resident Evil 2. I didn't bother with the remake. I wasn't feeling it. But 3, it's really tempting because that is my favorite Resident Evil game. hmm I love, love, love that game. And that remake looks incredible, and yeah, it's tempting to say the least. Well, 2, I have no doubts. It's like, I don't care, I don't need it. Even though I love Resident Evil 2. And I don't know, why not reinvest all that money that they're getting into remaking one of their best series for crying out loud. I mean, Breath of Fire, it's their only, basically, not anymore, but it was the only RPG series. And as I said, by the PS1 era, it was a very prominent one. So the opportunities are there to re-release these games. They can do remakes to cut the attention in a certain style that will appeal to modern audience. Because if you present Breath of Fire 1 as it was released in 1993, now people it probably would ignore it, and rightly so, I might say, because it will only appeal the old school gamers and fans of the series. You will not get new gamers into it. But re-release it as an HD remake with a better graphics, and people might be more interested. And with Dragon Quarter, since I mentioned it, it's very easy to remake this game as well, considering that it's a self-shaded game. Simply like polish that as much as you can. Basically, use the Dragon Quest XI engine, so it's the best looking game on the market, and sell it as a Souls game. People will go nuts for it. Easy peasy. I don't see the problem there. That's how you do it, because now if you say it's a Souls game, it's like, oh, a Souls game. Yes, I'm gonna buy it. So there you go. That's how I would re-release Breath of Fire 1.2.5, and then I will start working on Breath of Fire 6 now that people will be more inclined, more interest. It's not that hard. I don't know how these companies works though. But anyways, let's end the tale of woe, because it's so sad to think of what could have been and what happened with the Breath of Fire series. But we'll never change the fact that this series holds a very special place in my heart. It all started, wow, basically 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago actually, when on the PlayStation 1 I stumbled upon this game, whatever it was, I had no idea, and it opened the floors for an entire genre to me, basically, and to a new kind of storytelling that I never experienced in gaming, and made me truly fall in love with the media, because up until then I was more of a, I don't want to say happy-go-lucky kind of gamer, but in a kind of way. I mean, I love gaming. It was a hobby that I really, really enjoyed, but because of this game, everything changed. I say, this is my main hobby now. I want to play games like this as much as I can, because they are truly special. And it's mainly because of these two games that I became and still am, the RPG fanatic that I am to this day. And even though I gave a lot of shit to Capcom, I will never thank them enough when they released this little gem in 1993 that in one day in the future I will try and experience. But it all started very humble origins, and it just got better and better. And yeah, it's something that I will never forget. So yeah, a big thank you to Capcom to create Breath of Fire. The most important series ever experienced, my favorite games of all time, for so many reasons, as I explained up until now. And even though I have such a love-hate relation with Capcom. I mean, I love you so much for creating this, and I hate you so much for how you treated it, Capcom. But you give us 3 and 4, so I cannot. And 5 and 1, you gave us Breath of Fire, so I have no rights to complain. So I think this should be enough. I mean, I talked for a long time. My throat is tired, and that's it for me. But definitely, what you guys think about the Breath of Fire series? I mean, have you ever experienced the games? If so, what you think about them? Since they, as I explained clearly, I mean, they had such an important place in my heart. But I would be curious, what are your opinions on it? Would you like to see remakes, or you think it's better to be left alone in the eons and annals of gaming? Definitely be curious to know your opinions on the Breath of Fire series and what you think of how Capcom, as I keep saying, mistreated it, or let's say did nothing with it, because that's a fact, and how certain companies treat their series. Because again, I think, and now this is just a last tangent, I think it has to do with how gaming has changed, I think. Because back in the day, you just like release your games and that's it. Now you got those over the top special editions and all of that, which there is a special edition for Breath of Fire 3, incredible enough, and I really want that. But it's, as I said, like back then you just released the games, and now you probably, now if Breath of Fire 4 would be released now, you would have like a box as big as this with an entire dragon and Ryu fishing. I don't know, those like a book art and soundtrack. I mean, I would love that, but I said back then, I mean, not really. I mean, it wasn't part of the, how can I say, like gaming marketing in a way. Not yet, at least. The PS1 shyly try that, but I would say it's really something more recent with those big special editions. And I think that Breath of Fire kind of fell victim of this. Maybe if it was released now as it was back then, but with the super special editions and stuff like that, I mean, we would have something. We would have like more like collectibles. Like, for example, now that they have released the games on the Switch, it could be cool to have amiibos, for example. There's so many options. But anyways, I'm tired. We keep talking about all the things Capcom could have done with the series. I'm just gonna get more and more depressed. Well, I want to leave this as a positive thing at the end, but yeah, as I said, like the game that started it all and my favorite game of all time, I will always, this series and these games will always have a super special place in my heart that no matter what happened will never be touched or challenged. And that's it. Again, let me know what you think about the series, and this is it. I hope you guys enjoyed this really long video, and I'll talk to you soon, and take care.